This is the GerleMen podcast. My name is Mike Gurley, and I'm the host and founder of GerleMen.com, a community of gay men and anyone self-identified as the other, designed to help you own your personal dignity, strengthen your connection to your chosen families, and thrive in general society. Today's conversation with Joel is the podcast's first deep dive into the connection between our sexual behavior and our spirituality. Joel helps us try on the ancient Tantra concept that everything about our experience on Earth is spiritual, including our sexual energy. Prior to the pandemic, I visited Joel's gorgeous studio in Seattle, Washington, where I learned to celebrate, cultivate, and conserve my own lower chakra energy. The experience was an embodiment of transforming crotch-centered connections into heart-centered community. Enjoy the show. The moment you realized you were a gay man, you were forced onto the path of the other. So you know oppression, inside and out. The calling of otherness has led you on your own hero's journey, and that journey has prepared you for greatness. You are a man answering the call to brotherhood, to conscious sex, and to heart-centered connection. Welcome home, brother. Welcome to GerleMen Podcast, Joel.
Thank you, Michael.
It is great to see you. I wish we were in person. I've had, the pleasure of being in your studio and in your workshops a couple of times, and the trip from LA to Seattle was totally worth it, mostly because of you. Also, Seattle is just stunning. I like to start every asking each guest, how they're feeling, because I believe understanding our state of being helps us get what we want. So how are you feeling?
I'm a little bit nervous just because I've never done a podcast before. So just putting that out there that I'm a little bit nervous.
That's real.
Yeah. Otherwise I feel good. I slept good last night, got my practice in this morning. So I'm good.
That's great. What's your morning practice?
I chant each morning. Yeah. So I go through it's usually about half hour, 45 minutes each morning of chanting.
That's fantastic. So can you give us kind of like an arc on how you got into yoga and then how you got into the men's work that you do in yoga and the Tantra and all of that? Just basically kind of get us oriented on the map of like who Joel Benjamin is. And then we're going to dive deeper.
Sure. Okay. I've always been in the fitness industry. When I was in high school in the 80s, I taught aerobics classes and then became a personal trainer when I was living in Manhattan and managed a health club when I first moved to Seattle. Didn't really do any yoga up to that point, though. I was more, into the weightlifting and things that every gay man did in the 80s and 90s. And then George Bush became president. And looking back on that now,
I know. Like, that's why I'm laughing.
George Bush to be president right now.
Yeah.
But if you put yourself back to when George Bush became president, it was pretty traumatic, just in that he just did not seem equipped to be president. And there was all of the questions about how he became president. And it really was something that was keeping me up at night. And I was having a hard time accepting. So I wandered into my first yoga class, basically. And I was struck by several things. The first thing that really hooked me was just the sense of community. I had never been to the class before, and I felt so welcomed and it was such a comfortable place to be, even though I had never been there before. And then the more I kept showing up, the more I started to realize that, I could cope with George Bush being president. So I credit George Bush for, getting me into my first yoga class, because weightlifting just wasn't cutting it for me. It wasn't getting rid of the angst, basically.
Yeah.
Yoga got me there.
So you got into yoga. So when did you open the actual Smith? And I just flat out admitted I'm so jealous of your space. It's so beautiful. It's exactly everything from the way it looks. You're in it right now, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And when I said yes to taking the space, there needed to be a build out. I didn't have any money saved for that. So I just kind of put the word out to the yogis who'd been practicing with me over the years. And I found out I had like 3 carpenters practicing with me and a couple of electricians practicing with me that I didn't know that that's what they did for a living. And for about 3 weeks, I'd show up at this space every morning. There'd be like 5 people waiting outside saying, "What are we doing today?"
Wow.
So literally the yogis who had been practicing with me in my old space called Yoga Shack basically created their practice space, Yoga Smith, the yogis who built it basically. And I think that's one of the main reasons why it does feel special when you come into the space, is because it literally was built by the yogis who practice here.
Wow, that
So
story
a lot of love.
that is really inspiring to talk about that
That
love and that interdependence with other people.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. That and the fact that the building that the Smith is in, it's just, it's the 2-story brownstone, and it was built in the 1880s. And downstairs has always been a saloon. So the story is that this space upstairs from the saloon used to be the brothel.
Oh, wow.
So I think that's one of the reasons why it feels good up here as well, because there's a lot of good times happen up here.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah. Well, let's get into that makes me want to think about, you offer a lot of traditional practice, but this podcast is for gay men, and maybe can we just jump into that? Let's start talking about, Tantra and these, you call them your bodywork classes, and what are these what are the different offerings, first of all, that you have?
Well, I am a licensed massage therapist, and I've been one for about 25 years. When I started teaching yoga, what I found, and probably what most people find as you get older, is that each thing that you do in life, I think, if you take the time and look back, becomes a stepping stone for the next thing that you do. Sometimes it's an obvious link, and sometimes, the connections are not as obvious. But I was a massage therapist, in addition to teaching yoga. And when I first opened Yoga Smith, I was looking for ways to generate revenue. And a woman had approached me because she was teaching couples massage workshops. It was mostly straight couples who would show up. Every now and then there was a gay couple who would show up, but it was mostly straight couples. And it kind of planted the seed in my head about, wow, why not offer this to gay men, as a way to learn how to give and how to receive a massage. So I kind of thought about it for several years. And then it was probably like 3 years ago, I made the investment, bought 10 massage tables for the studio, and started, offering the bodywork workshops. And it's kind of a tiered thing. Everyone has to take the intro workshop first. And that's where you basically learn the basics, how to give a massage and how to receive a massage. And then from there, that opens the door so that you can participate in the other bodywork events that I host. One is the bodywork exchange, where basically it's set up pretty much like the intro workshop, except it's a little more, I like to just call it lightly guided, as opposed to the intro workshop, which is me talking through the whole thing. So it's, the tables are all set up. Half the group lies down on the tables. They're the receivers for the first half of the event. And then everybody, swaps places once, everybody has received a full body massage. And then the other event that I host I call it Tantra Edge. And that one doesn't involve massage tables. That one is, we start off with about a half hour of jockstrap yoga. Guys,
which I love. That look is so sexy.
I think it's sexier than naked yoga. I think that leaving a little bit to the imagination.
I think it is too.
Sexy. Yeah. And what's not sexy about a room full of, dudes in jocks.
Yeah. And I like teaching naked yoga, and it's great. But I mean, I've always had the same experience from my very first yoga class that was naked, which is, this doesn't feel strange at all.
Exactly. No, it feels totally natural. It feels totally natural. Yeah. And what I've found also is that, guys need support when they exercise. Like, I'll practice naked sometimes by myself because I'm going at my own speed. So if things need adjusting, I can take the time to adjust.
Yeah.
But, when you're in a class, not everybody is as good at listening to their own body and going at their own pace. So I found that, you have everybody wear jocks, and then you know that, okay, everybody is going to be safe while they're practicing.
Yeah.
So we start off with jockstrap yoga, and just to kind of warm up and to kind of, start to feel sexy and just to get the vibe going. And then we transition to partner energy work, and that's all guided. And then we form a circle of chairs, and half the group sits down in the chairs and they're blindfolded. And then the other half of the group, basically you and the guys in the chairs don't know who their partner is. And it's basically the whole rest of the event is Tantra edging. Okay. And it's not jacking, it's like, you see how edging is put out there, like on Twitter and stuff. And usually it's just like, this frantic jacking. And then when the dude starts to get close, it's hands off, until things settle down.
My boyfriend, who's 17 years younger than me, is constantly telling me about things that people don't understand who are younger. So just edging at all is that people might not know what that is, and that's I mean, the way I know, it's basically you're stroking. You can do it with yourself or with somebody else, but it's like working on yourself, stroking your own dick until you're close to coming, and then just not coming. I mean, That's basically the generic version of edging, right?
Yeah.
Getting really, really close to orgasm and then not having an orgasm. And
right.
Apparently, we know a lot more than we think we know, Joel. So sometimes we need to break it down.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, you can approach it from that perspective. The whole, not coming thing, to me, that's a negative. Then you're focusing on not doing something, as opposed to focusing on cultivating that energy. To me, that's the purpose of edging, is to cultivate that energy, because otherwise, you're stroking your cock or someone else is stroking your cock. You get to the point of ejaculation, you go over, and then you need a nap, basically, because all that vibe that you just worked up, you just released, as opposed to with tantric edging, it's about cultivating that vibe. It's about finding those plateaus, so it's not just a steady climb and then over the edge. And it's also about not breaking contact. There's none of this, basically, because there's a whole series. I call it the deep stroke sequence, basically, where it's a whole series of very creative cock strokes that you cycle through. You cycle through them. I mean, you remember them from the workshop. You cycle through them. And basically what that does is it keeps your nervous system guessing, because your nervous system knows where this is going, because we've all been doing this since we discovered what doing this does. So that pathway has been worn, very, very smooth, and it's smooth sailing down that path. But by constantly changing it up, and I mean, in the workshops, I'm like a drill sergeant. Every 5 or 10 seconds, I'm like, change up the stroke, guys, change up the stroke. It allows you to not break contact, okay, because the person who's receiving basically is kept at this really nice heightened plateau, as opposed to it just building.
I mean, I would just like to speak to that. It speaks exactly what I'm trying to do with the GerleMen podcast is take us from to I believe in crotch-centered connection. I believe that we can get
Mhm.
someplace from hookups and from like sex is really, really positive. But when we just leave it at sex and we're missing this whole other realm, like all the chakras, basically, we're not
Yeah.
moving that energy up into our bodies, and then we're not able to have such a heart-centered connection.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was what was cool about doing that one workshop I did with you was I felt it moving up. I felt it
Mhm.
like, in my gut, in my chest. I even felt it, like all the way up and out. And just, I was able to have that more intimate energy with these guys. And I
Mhm.
left like buzzing with that
Yeah.
energy. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And we're all
that's
capable of
incredible.
that. Yeah, we're all capable of that. It's just that, most of us have not been introduced to that capability that, inherently is part of, who we are. And yes, and, drawing the energy up from our cock and our balls to our heart, you know, and, and it becomes a meditation when you start to internalize what's going on as opposed to just focusing on the external. And that's the whole point of the blindfold during the Tantra Edge, is that the guys who are receiving, you don't know who is, working on you, because you're going to have multiple partners working on you during the course of the event. So you take away the sense of sight, and you can hear the person's breath, you can feel their touch, you can smell them, but we are very sight-centric, beings. So you take away that sense and people go inward. And then it really does become a meditation. It's the same thing with, kind of a side effect of constantly changing up the strokes is you can jack and just put it into automatic pilot, and your mind can be anywhere else. But by constantly changing up the stroke, you have to be present. You got to pay attention to what you're doing. And that's what meditation is all about. It's just being present,
Being
in every
present.
new
Yeah.
moment.
So then yeah. Well, then then I love this whole idea about the union of sex and spirit. Is that what you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Like a union of sex and spirit? Some people would think that's impossible.
Yeah. And that's because that's what, we've been told for a very long time, is that, spirit's over here and sex is over here. And there's this giant chasm between the two, and the two shall never meet.
Right. And like sex will even prevent spiritual connection. There's that kind of, because all the judgment and stuff like that.
And
So
shame.
That's the reason I'm just like, yes, please tell us, please talk about this, how sex and spirit actually come together somehow.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the basis of Tantra. It's the thing that kind of turned me on about Tantra, from the first time that I learned about Tantra. There's two things that make Tantra unique. The first thing is that it's the oldest spiritual practice known to mankind, the oldest spiritual philosophy known to mankind. There may have been ones before Tantra, but as far as the written, history is concerned, Tantra is the oldest. And Tantra is the only spiritual philosophy that includes our sex life in our spiritual life. And people who've heard the word Tantra in the West, a lot of them think, oh yeah, that's that like mystical, sexual practice. And it is, but, ancient yogis in caves didn't think, well, let's come up with this, mystical sexual practice. Basically, the foundation of tantric philosophy is that all aspects of your life should be part of your spiritual practice. That's why sex is included. It's because all aspects of our life should be part of our spiritual practice. And
wow,
sex is part of our life.
I really love that. And I think, especially for gay men, we learn growing up that it's safer to compartmentalize our lives, and really have I did it as a kid growing up. I knew I was gay in my senior year in high school, and I would sneak out and have sex with my boyfriend, and then wake up the next morning and put on a suit and go to church and be somebody completely else. And I enjoyed the spirituality of church. I enjoyed the sex. It never occurred to me that I could bridge them somehow.
Yeah. I don't think it, I mean, it's becoming more and more, that those teachings are becoming more and more accessible in our culture, but we still have a long way, to go before, there's that alternative that coexists with basically what we've all been taught. So,
yeah,
but it is becoming, more and more accessible, for people, and not just for gay people, for straight people, as well. Straight people were exploring Tantra before even, gay people were. I mean, as far as just, you go into, the section of a bookstore that has, Tantric philosophy, the majority of it is geared towards straight people. There's a handful of books that are geared towards gay men and gay women.
Yeah.
But I'd say that we are definitely leading the way, or at least are catching up in putting it out there into the world at this point.
What do you think are some of the energetic, mental, societal, what are the breakdowns? What do people that you've worked with, I mean, what do they have to get through to go from thinking sex is maybe even like dirty and out there, it's not connected to me, it's bad, and then coming in and actually making that a spiritual process? Have you seen people evolve? I would imagine you have people come in. Did you say you had one guy actually left a class once? I mean, which is fascinating to me, because anybody, if you're interested in this, I was not surprised at anything. You are very, very clear about everything that's going to happen in there. But why do you think a person would leave after knowing step by step what was going to happen?
I don't think that he did know step by step what was going to happen, just knowing after the fact where he was coming from coming into it. It was what we were talking about before. It was a compartmentalization. And I think that there were aspects of what he knew what was going to go on that he was really intrigued by. And then I think the aspects that scared him or that he wasn't ready for, he just didn't think about. But then you're confronted with it, when you're lying on the table, being worked on by, several different partners, and trying to find something to love about each person that you work on during the course of an event and that works on you during the course of an event, and I think that can be a really challenging thing for people, is to really, find something to love about, and not just the people who are, you're connecting with during a workshop, but just in general. Even people who you disagree with, profoundly, if you find something to love about them, then you can at least meet and talk and be kind to one another. So I think that contributed to that. But as far as just, guys who've never experienced something like this and never experienced that connection between, sex and spirituality, I'd say there's nothing, more grounding and more just tribal and more ancient feeling than a whole room full of men breathing together and, sighing out on sound together and experiencing, deep, physical pleasure together. To me, that's spiritual.
And I agree. And I think it's what I make up about that is that it takes a special kind of courage. It's not the courage to have sports sex, which I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of all kinds of sex, and it's a different courage than going to a dungeon party or a sex party. All of those acts would happen much more intensely at an event like that, where I think a lot of gay men are, we've gotten comfortable with that. But the whole idea of having connected sexual experience with another person, when you've actually looked them in the eyes and you're seeing their spirit, when you're seeing the divine in them,
Mm-hmm.
and then encountering, engaging in sexual behavior, that's the big ask. That's
Yeah.
and I love it because I just that's a special connection.
Yeah.
That is a special connection, and I would imagine that your regulars, I feel connected with those guys like I do in these heart circles I do with men that, in other disciplines. And I would imagine the same connection happens with your guys.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think just the base of it all is willingness to be vulnerable. You allow yourself to be vulnerable, and it kind of opens you up to all of these just experiences and connections that otherwise you basically would have just been, keeping it at arm's length.
Yeah, and I
And I
just want to
think that
jump in here, and I don't think, I mean, just to clarify, you're not talking about sexual vulnerability.
no, just being open to the experience, and not letting your fear prevent you from experiencing the things in life that you're drawn to. Yeah, there's a power in being vulnerable. And in fact, I would say that's being vulnerable is one of the most powerful positions that we can allow ourselves to take.
Yeah, I would join
And
you and say that vulnerability is the ultimate act of courage. You
I
know,
agree. Yep.
we can clench our teeth and go into battle, knocking things down and whatever. And that's a form of courage. And thank you for
Mm-hmm.
the men and women who do that.
Mm-hmm.
But this courage to be vulnerable and saying, I need on a physical and spiritual level a connection with you,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I encourage anybody listening to take that chance. And
Yeah, and
maybe
that's
take it
and
within Joel's class because you set up a whole structure for that I think does feed into regular everyday life. You were getting that into that just a few minutes ago, that we can come up with this vulnerability like in a class where we're with another man, and what you were talking about, this I forgot what to call it. I don't want to call it a circle jerk,
the
but that's
Tantra
just
edge.
the Tantra
Tantra
edge,
edge. Yeah.
which is way different. Um,
It's an
uh,
it's an elevated circle jerk.
yeah, yeah, it really is, because
Basically, I mean,
you're asking
yeah,
the guys to be energetically, spiritually connected with each other.
totally. And it's taking that, that circle jerk. Growing up, we either participated in or always fantasized about participating in, and taking it to the next level, allowing it to evolve, to basically what it, when most people think of, a circle jerk, you elevate it, and then it becomes something meaningful, and really powerful, and a form of spiritual practice.
Yeah, and so you talk about the 3 C's of embodying sexual energy. Can you talk
Mm-hmm.
about that?
The
That like cultivate,
cultivate,
celebrate, and
celebrate, and
conserve. What does
conserve.
that
Yes.
mean?
I mean, cultivating is cultivating that energy, so it's like normally, well, not normally, but, most guys, when you start to feel horny, when you start to feel that energy, the first response is to get off. The first response is to either get yourself off or to go on Grindr, find someone to get you off, and the first response to that energy, I mean, sexual energy is one of the most powerful healing energies that the body produces. On a cosmic level, sexual energy manifests as creative energy, most powerful energy in the universe. Nothing would be here without creative energy. We wouldn't be here without creative energy. So why would you want your first response to that energy welling up in your body to be to get rid of it?
And just to be clear, I mean, the street term for that might just be horny.
Yeah, horny. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so instead of responding to that, with basically just the way that we've all trained ourselves to respond to it, which is to get off and to release that energy, it's just a change of intention. You switch your intention to, instead of getting off, you change your intention to cultivating that energy. It's just like, oh, okay, it's already getting started, so I'm just going to help it along. And celebrating that energy, starting to really understand the benefits of that energy, and, how it feeds the rest of your life. I mean, it's not just in the moment, how it feels good when you're working with that energy. It's okay. Well, how is that energy now? When I put my cock back in my pants and walk out my front door, how is that energy going to feed the rest of my life? How is it going to feed whatever creative projects I'm, working on? How is it going to feed every interaction that I have? How is it going to feed how other people perceive me? Because when you're filled with creative energy, you're like a magnet. People are drawn to you, and not just sexually. People are just drawn to you because you're vibrating at such a high frequency. And then to conserve, which is basically, you choose not to release that energy. Not all the time. You've taken the workshop, so I'm very clear in the workshop that there's no shame in ejaculating. You just don't have that be the go-to each time you experience that energy. So you consciously decide more often than not to conserve that energy as opposed to releasing that energy.
Yeah.
So that's the cultivate, celebrate, and conserve.
I love that. I played with that in a certain, what I do now is, when we're able to have hookup sex, I'll just start there, because I just had a conversation last night with 4 of my friends who are all kind of still have a lot of shame about hooking up, or not shame. They just think it's completely antithetical to having a full sexual and connected life. And I believe we can have both. Or what everybody needs to do what works for them. I'm talking about me. But when you're talking about feeling this, cultivating that energy and celebrating it, for me, if I am online, now I just, or like a hookup app or something like that, and I feel that energy happening, instead of, like you said, it is this weird feeling, I need to like release that. Instead of releasing it, let it go and just let it well up in me, and I have all of that. And the way I celebrate it now too is I'm very, very conscious of the time between we agree to hook up and when the act happens. And as I've just decided to instead of just focusing on what's going to happen when I get there or when he gets here, I've just felt that energy. And sometimes I've started to think this might be the best part of this whole 3-step process of getting horny and like having all this energy, and then getting off is kind of always just, not as delightful as the other 2 steps.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I found that what it does is then it, even random hookups become meaningful then, because you're actually connecting with someone. You're not just using each other to get each other off. So you don't have to even use the word, Tantra. You can just say to someone, hey, let's edge for a while, because edging basically forces you to communicate. You got to look each other in the eye periodically and say, I'm getting close. And, once you kind of get into the groove of edging and cultivating and celebrating that energy together for a while, then you really start to feel its power. And then you start to think, well, do I want to release? Because I'm really digging the way I feel right now, So it becomes the choice not to release doesn't become an act of denial, of self-denial. Basically, it becomes a choice where okay, I want to keep feeling this. I don't want to release any of it. So it's not such a most guys are like, well, how do you do that? How do you choose not to come? It's just like once you've cultivated that energy for a while, and usually it's not like a long period of time. Usually it's like 20 to 30 minutes of cultivating that energy, either by yourself or with someone else. You come into this state of, I don't like this term, but it's a term that most people are familiar with, gooning. I call it, you've never heard that?
Yeah.
Good. Hopefully it doesn't like spread, because it's this weird term that, and I won't even say it again, but basically it's how people describe that state of, when you see guys being edged, like on Twitter or whatever, it's this kind of just this blankness in their face. It's like they go into a trance, basically. And I call it cresting because it's a very internalized state. And that's why their face gets relaxed and why, from the outside, it looks like they're not really there. But it's a very internalized, energetic, but at the same time, very, very calm place. It's a really nice place to be. And that's what that energy does for us when we cultivate it for an extended period of time and allow it to really spread throughout our body. And you get to that place, you get to that cresting zone, and then you really start to debate in your mind, well, do I want to come or do I just want to be here for a while?
Yeah, I've seen that, especially in BDSM scenes where some people stand in line for these guys who know how to connect with the guy on the table and have a true that experience you're talking about. What you described, I've seen the guys having that experience, and what I've seen though is the other guy is just really in tune with both guys are really in tune with each other. And able to get, I do like that whole idea of cresting. It's just, it's like a huge wave that you're kind of controlling, right? Yeah.
Totally.
How many orgasms is the right amount of orgasms for a guy to have?
There's some formula that like in Taoism, and I'm trying to remember what it is. It has to do with like your age, and off the top of my head, I don't remember what it is. But what I tell guys is, it becomes self-experimentation, okay? Like when I work with guys one-on-one, inevitably, I always ask them, how many times a week, just on average, do you ejaculate? And for most guys, they should be ejaculating half as much as they do. And it doesn't mean you stroke your cock any less. It doesn't mean that you hook up any less. You just choose not to ejaculate after every session, at the end of every session. But what I tell guys is, cut it in half and just start to notice how you feel on those days or those periods of days when you don't ejaculate. Notice how much more energy you have. Notice how much more, clarity of thought you have. And notice how much more creative energy you have, to focus on the things in your life that you're trying to make happen. And then it becomes, it's really up to each individual, how long they want to be in that period between ejaculations. Some guys, younger guys, the periods are definitely shorter, but it's up to each guy, some guys, it's, every couple of days. Some guys, it's every couple of weeks. Some guys, it's every couple of months.
Well, I love that. And I love that it's, you're taking our physiology into consideration, by age and everything. I just find that super useful. And the older I get too, it's easier to come less and I'm enjoying it more. So, and I understand that like things change, as you get younger or older where that comes, but being able to find that as an energy center, as a fuel, as a retreat, or, I love it. I love it. And that's coming from a highly sexualized gay upbringing, I will say, because it was all about getting off when I was first, young,
Completely.
I thought I was going to die without it.
Yeah. And for a lot of guys, that's basically, the pattern that they set up for themselves when they were young. And then they just continue that pattern throughout their life. And they don't even think about, how they feel after they ejaculate and for the rest of the day. And, for the next several days. I don't remember where I read this, but it takes our body a third of our energy basically to replenish our sperm supplies after we ejaculate. So, you think in terms of just, forget the energetic component, forget the spiritual component, just from a physiological perspective, that's a third of your energy that's not going to support your immune system. It's not going to support your digestion. It's not going to support, mental focus. It's just going to, replenish your sperm supply that you probably, shot down the shower drain, So it makes you think twice about ejaculating. It's like, okay, do I have, the next, couple of days, would it be okay to operate, kind of just on, not as many cylinders as I normally would have going?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it really is easy to understand if let's just say hypothetically, somebody's at the gym and they're able to like have the choice of getting off or not with another guy. My experience is that the workout is almost impossible if I try to if I come right before I try to work out.
Yeah. Yep.
I
Same
mean,
thing with
that's just
guys
a very base level exam. That's not all the spiritual stuff, and that's just an everyday
but
thing.
that's most people's, reality is, a lot of guys will wake up in the morning and before they even get out of bed, they'll masturbate, and, then you just want to roll over and go back to sleep, because you're starting off depleting yourself.
Yeah. As opposed to, I think people don't understand that they're cutting themselves off from creative energy, from all that stuff that you mentioned earlier, that, instead of pumping yourself up, all of that. So, this can be a touchy subject, but what kind of guys end up in your classes?
I'm pretty specific as far as, how I put my, myself and my group out there. So I think that draws a certain kind of guy toward my classes and my workshops. Meaning,
you're talking about like your Instagram account and your those things. Uh-huh.
Yeah, lots of pictures of sexy guys, but at the same time, you read the captions, and it's all being supported from a spiritual perspective. And that's really important. It's really important that guys understand that, yeah, there's going to be sexy, naked dudes in the room with you, but we're all here to learn something together. We're all here to become better human beings together. So, what's important to the circle of men who participate in each workshop is that all the other men who participate are able to meet the group, the circle where it's starting from. So it's really important to me that guys who participate in the workshops have already been working on themselves, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. It's important to have some sort of a practice, to have had the curiosity beforehand that you started to delve into it on your own, because it's going to make the experience of the whole group a lot better if everybody is starting from similar places. And, that's...
Well, let me just ask a question for my boyfriend. Are the guys hot?
The guys,
I know what you're saying. I just, I'm just going to get it at home if I don't ask that question.
No, that's cool. I think the guys are hot. I think anybody who is grounded and lives in their physical body and is comfortable in their own skin, there's a sexiness to that for sure. But guys take care of themselves. The guys who participate in the workshops take care of themselves. They go to the gym. You don't have to have a perfect, West Hollywood body to come to the workshops, but you have to have enough self-love. Just inherently, you have to have enough self-love to take care of this, on some level, whether that means doing yoga, whether that means, swimming, whether that means hiking. You have to have some sort of a physical practice that supports your physical body. And I think that's sexy,
I agree.
Different body types are sexy, but someone who takes care of themselves spiritually, mentally, and physically, I think is just inherently sexy.
Yeah. From visiting you a couple times, I would be there all the freaking time if we were closer. I would say that the pictures are accurate and the men are all interesting. They're all different ages, but they all do have those three things in common that you're talking about: physically, mentally, spiritually. They're all.
Yeah, going. I think like probably one of the like the top end. There's a couple of guys who are in their late 60s, 70s in our group. We're gonna all be there someday, and I think that it's really important. As I like to think that the gay community is starting to move beyond just kind of the focus on youth and beauty and having that be basically, the way you get in the door to everything. And I think it's important as teachers that we lead the way on that we show that, when you're in your 60s and 70s and 80s, you're still sexy and you still want that connection with other people. And you've got a lot to offer younger guys that, you could save them a lot of heartache by, being there and connecting with them. And then they won't make the same mistakes that you made along the way.
Well, and I'm finding getting older, the guys who have invested in themselves on mentally, physically, spiritually, those are the ones that are still, lots of men are attracted to them on all three of those levels, mentally, physically, and spiritually. But if we don't invest in ourselves, then we just went from being young to being old. And so we had youth to offer, and now we're old. And that's the reason we become isolated.
Right.
So, with that in mind, I like to ask everybody these same questions on the podcast, especially people who are modeling these things. So, how do you invest in yourself, in your own dignity? I would say, or, starting with your practices, or what do you do to feed Joel Benjamin's energy?
I practice. I mean, I think that's really important. I think some form of practice every day is really important, and it doesn't have to be a whole elaborate full practice every day. But what I tell the people who practice with me is the same thing that, that I do myself, is that, on those days when you've got 10 minutes, sit down and hum for 10 minutes. Then that's your practice. But something every day, roll out your mat, and whether you actually do, a full, asana practice, or whether you just hum for 10 minutes, something every day. That's one of the things that I've found helps me sleep at night and just helps me feel like I'm practicing what I preach. I think that's really important. There's this saying that you practice for your students and you teach for yourself. So basically, what you learn in your own practice is what then you have to offer.
Yeah.
And inevitably, while you're teaching, and I mean, this as a teacher, while you're teaching, when you're giving, you start to make all of these other kinds of connections, and you start to really understand those concepts that kind of came to you during your practice. You start to understand them at a much deeper level by sharing them with other people.
I never made that connection before. I kind of got it. I'd heard you say that before, but that all that practice, whether it's meditation or reading or studying or being open, it's for the other people in my life who are going to interact with me.
And by giving it to them, that's how you're growing as an individual.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What are your special gifts? What are your greatness? What makes you special? And do you think that has anything to do with you being a gay man?
I think most of what I do and how I kind of move through the world has to do with, me being a gay man. I think that gay men are given a very special gift. You look back through history and, it was always, the gay people of the tribe who were, the shaman and the medicine people and, the peacemakers of the tribe. And it's because of the qualities that just are inherent to being gay. Just the fact that, from a very early age, you realize that you're different than other kids but it kind of opens you up to going inside, to internalizing and to being much more introspective, I think, than other little kids are. So from a very early age, you start to become, I think, much more self-aware than other people who are, represented by society as a whole. Just it's always out there for them to see. They see themselves represented in society all over the place. And for gay people, it's becoming more and more now, but, still, we're not the majority of the population. So I'm hoping that introspection from an early age continues, because I think you grow up to be a much more centered, much more compassionate, much kinder, hopefully much wiser individual than you would be at a younger age. Basically, I think anybody who's paying attention during their life acquires wisdom as they get older. But I think that because as gay people, our introspection usually starts at a much younger age, we acquire that wisdom. We start a lot earlier, so we get more and more of it as we go because we got a head start, basically. And I think that those are the things that motivate me to want to share those things. And I don't have it all figured out, but I'm pretty confident in certain things and in the ways that I know that, that have worked for me. And those are the things that I share. The things that I know are the things that I share. And what I think we all find is that we know a lot more than we think we know.
Yep.
And that when we actually share those things, that we have the courage to open our mouths and our hearts, be vulnerable, and put it out there, what we find is that everyone else is thinking and feeling the same thing. Everyone has the same insecurities. Everyone has the same, wants and needs and desires. And it just takes someone to kind of get the ball rolling, and it just helps open people up.
Well, and thank you for doing that, for getting the ball rolling, so to speak, with men, connecting, moving from, connecting their hearts and their crotches and their spirituality. So thank you for that. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation and every conversation we've ever had. So thanks for doing this, and thanks for rewiring your whole studio just for this interview. No, I'm just joking, because I know that you needed to redo a lot of stuff for your online things. And I do want to mention that now too, that you've gone online. So these classes are offered now. If you're anywhere on the planet listening to this, you can join Joel in Seattle and see this beautiful space, and then maybe actually go there sometime.
Yeah.
Joel, thank you for being here, and thank you for the work that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you for the work that you do, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the show, my friend. Now stay connected by subscribing to GerleMen podcast and sharing with your friends on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or anywhere else podcasts can be found. Visit the webpage at GerleMen.com, sign up for the newsletter, and find more details about each episode. Let's make this a conversation, because I'd really like to hear from you. Join us on Facebook at GerleMen. Submit your questions, suggest topics, or just chat with your brothers. Want to add your own 2 cents? Use the voice memo feature on your smartphone. Ask a question or say anything. We just might play it on the podcast. Email the file to mike@GerleMen.com. Until next time.